All right. This shows the stratification of high school students in Illinois using the Prairie State Achievement Exam. The results based on results and income. Okay, I don't know. Can you guys see that? See the graph?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So on this graph, if each colored line represents income level and also represents it represents their how well they did in this exam. And this graph to me speaks volumes. If you'll notice, some of these lines meet, but they never cross. So basically what it's saying is you're based on your income is going to decide how well you do on this test. And that is painful to look at. Right. So what they're saying is no matter how good a student you are, how good a cohort of students you are, you will never reach the heights of these kids that already have money and they're starting off. They're already on third base, and you don't even get a chance to get to bat if you don't make a certain amount of money. If your family's not making a certain amount of money, and we all know we just went through a crash, and we all know about how intergenerational wealth does not function in our communities. We're being in some ways we're being set up for failure. Zakia, I'd like to hear your input on that graph and from your experience.
Yeah, no, we are absolutely being set up for failure. I was listening to just a minute ago, just listening and hearing how, you say people respond to, your Facebook page or whatever. How could you support public education? Like, we see that all the time, right? And the schools that I know of, again, not just in New York, but around the country, and Black and brown communities are absolutely being set up. Because if decades previously, you were able to access tons of, when I was in school, I stated myself quite a bit. You couldn't go on a train, you couldn't get on a bus without a student having an instrument in their hand. You just would bump into each other. You just would have it. It wasn't in school. You had to be in band or chorus. You had unlimited amounts of sports programs that you could participate in. You had all those things, shop and all those, things we had to. They didn't necessarily move girls into shop. That's a whole nother conversation. We had stenography and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I won't hold that against anybody now.
We appreciate that.
Those things are not there. And if you cannot, and they've been replaced by testing. They've been replaced by this crazy thought that if we drill and kill, if we use testing, high stakes of testing, not the way they're supposed to be, which is an assessment, but to fire teachers, close schools, and to demonize the teaching profession, as well as those children sitting in those schools, label them as failures, right? And so if we don't think that all those things impact not only physically a building because you're getting rid of a school, but morally, the students, parents, and children that sit in those schools, right, year after year. And in New York, we saw 160 plus schools close under Bloomberg, right? Across this country, we've seen thousands of schools closed in Black and brown communities, period, right? And so when we look at testing, as a parent, as I shared, of 8, only my son is the last one in school. He's a junior in school now. The other 7 have graduated out of public school. But when you look at how testing is being used, it's not about assessments. It is absolutely about everything around making money, even the money in regards to taking the test from organizations like Pedersen and others. It's become such a money maker that even when you look at statistics like that and look at the poverty based on the testing, is it a fair assessment even from that perspective? Because if you're closing schools, you're labeling children and teachers as failures, you're not paying teachers a rate of pay that they're livable for them, so they move into the suburbs. And at the same time, you're not equitably funding schools and you're privatizing the system at the same time. Like, this money that's based for public schools is coming out of the same pot of money that people who push charters are talking about. So if we already don't have art and music, and we're pushing and privatizing and creating more charters, and we're not saying that they're good charters, I'm just saying charters in general. If we're pushing more of those public dollars are less. And they don't
Yes.
translate and don't transfer to our schools well, to already underfunded schools. So I think what happened is, with this high stakes of testing, we've used it as a hammer, not only on children in schools and public education, but on democracy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, because a better informed electorate is going to make a much better country. Absolutely. Yeah. Zakia, let's stay in touch, because I wanted to have a debate about on my show about about charter schools. I have my own ideas, some good, some bad, but let's discuss that if we have some time. All right. Jesse, what do you think about that graph?
Well, you know what I think about it. I think
I do, but come on, let everybody else know.
I mentioned in the beginning, income has a direct influence on how well a kid does in school. And there are many different nuances that goes along with that. But we can talk about how things currently are, but I believe it's important to talk about how can we get past our current state. And I believe the way that we get past our current state is acknowledging that we need two things. We need additional public policy that support the need of the Black community, but we also need personal responsibility among members, families, to help those teachers, to help the administrators. I mean, we can build new schools in every Black community around the country, but if the parents aren't supporting the teachers and helping them move forward the educational agenda for those kids, then eventually, that public policy, I won't say went to waste, but didn't have the maximum impact. We need to look for the maximum impact, and how can we affect the most amount of children in the positive way possible. I mean, these kids are going to be, I lived in Germany for 5 years, okay? You have a lot of people who never resided outside of the United States. So they never get to see and interact with kids from different countries. Well, I can tell you, the kids in Germany, they're doing a whole lot different type of education and pursuing education as we do here in America. I mean, I was one of those band students walking around with an instrument. I didn't know what I wanted to play at first. I started out with a saxophone, went to a trombone, and wound up playing the trumpet. But all of those instruments were accessible. All of those programs were there. We need to ensure that not only we look at the things that were successful in the past and adjusting them to meet the needs of the 21st century, but we have to also think of, promoting 21st century policy. Kids, we need to start teaching kids how to balance checkbooks. We need to start, re-engaging the civic policies. Again, not to monopolize the time, but if I look at my map, I have a map on my board in my office here that has the voter turnout records in all of the counties. Now I can go to the particular area with the lowest voter turnout, and I'll normally find a failed or a education system that is below par. So what am I saying? Not only do we need to have public policy, and we also have to have personal responsibility from people. We need to get involved into the political process, Black and brown people, get involved into the political process and stop making excuses. Stop saying, oh, well, I'm going to leave that to them, and complaining when there's nothing that is done in your favor. So this is the time for us to acknowledge that we have things that we must do as Black and brown communities, and personal responsibilities that we must take as well. But we must also ensure that we are expecting, and Nina put the 3 C's down, but I like the last one as well, making sure that there are consequences that go along with the actions of these politicians when they ignore our children.
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Come on in.
I just wanted to say, I think, as someone who started off as a parent volunteer for a number of years, and not knowing what organizing was, that is the key to what we want to do and how we move forward. I've been connected to organizations all across this country youth organizing organizations, as well as parents, as well as the intergenerational organizations that for years, decades, 20 years or more, have been organizing. And there's often a misconception in our communities that we as parents don't care about our kids, don't care what they do. Look how they dress. Look how, like, they're so caught up in what our children are wearing, and so caught up in, maybe we don't have a college degree, or maybe we come to school in our pajamas, like that means something, like that they values us. Yet I know that there's parents, including myself, and young people across this country who are now adults, who are youth organizers or doing youth organizing work, whose voice was not valued then, is still not valued. And that what's the problem is that when policy is being set, there is no conversation. We are never brought into the conversation before someone decides to do something in our community. The fact, and even afterwards, we're never brought into conversation to say, how are we doing with this? How is it working? Is it working for you? It becomes the same folks who predominantly are white who are deciding the fate of our communities on every level. And I stick to education because that's my thing, but on every level, every time I turn around, there's someone who doesn't look like my children or people in my community who are deciding what is best for them. And often what happens, because they don't put parents at the table, they don't engage young people at the table to ask them, who better to ask than a young person who sits in the school? What can we do to make this better for you? Right? Who better to ask than the parents who send their children to those schools? How can we make this better for your child? And so I think, while I do agree, and this is part of the work that I've been doing for the last 16 years, which is working with educators. The key to this, the sustainable part of this, is parent and student organizing engagement in schools and on every level. Because at the end of the day, personally, I've been through 3 chancellors, 4 commissioners, and I'm still here, can sit at the table with each and every one of them, and they can't say anything that I don't already know. And so just like when we're in schools and we're with teachers and we're with principals, when they disengage or when they retire, guess who's still there? I'm there, or somebody else is there, because now my grandkids go to that school. And so what better way to engage us in every aspect of the school? Like, for example, in community schools, I think that's one of those solutions that we need to really engage in this country, which is not just to say it's a community, it's actually to engage the community and to have them be a crucial, integral partner in how well that school works and what's happening in that school. And when it doesn't work, that they have say, not advisory, that they have say in whether or not that should stay or not.
Absolutely. One of the members of the Progressive family, Brandon Sutton, he's a PhD candidate, and that's his area of specialty, is how communities interact with schools and trying to get schools to listen to the people in the community and trying to build structures to help people help people become more involved. And I think without community input, I think we just run in circles, and it becomes a way to bypass some sort of oversight, right? Because who should have more oversight than a parent and a student over how our school system functions? And I think it's become like you said, a money-making scheme. Some of it good, some of it bad, a good chunk of it bad. But again, I'm trying not to upset anybody today. So